But maybe Gunny was right. Maybe he was just being paranoid. The medical team had taken all of the women who weren't helping and the children back to the trucks. Almost everyone else was making themselves as comfortable as possible in one of the foxholes. Jim, Mark, and Gunny were each positioned in the second story of 3 of the cabins. Gunny so he could coordinate the attack, and Jim and Mark to serve as sharpshooters. They all had a commanding view of the courtyard. Jim and Gunny were in 2 of the smaller cabins, but Mark had drawn Mr. Davis's cabin. He could see not only the courtyard but also the gate and the way into the compound. It was his job to watch for John's return and give as much warning as possible to the others. As he sat and waited, he fought back his paranoia by going over his own plan. He hoped John and his gang would fight. He didn't want to see any of his friends get hurt, but that way he could put a 150-grain bullet in his former neighbor. He would look for John if fighting broke out and permanently part his hair. If they surrendered, he'd have to hand Big O over to Barney, who'd probably end up bumbling the case and letting him go, intentionally or not. Mark didn't want that to happen. He wanted to make sure John got his just desserts. The wait seemed endless. Mark looked out the window in the direction the convoy would come from almost every minute. Between looks, he'd try to take his mind off what might happen by thinking of other things. His family was foremost in his mind. How the neighborhood had all pulled together was not far behind, and how much they still had to do, and how hard the future would be close behind that. What was the future? Would the lights ever come back on? How would Rob do in the debate, and would he be elected sheriff? Mark's mind raced from thought to thought like a chronic channel surfer held the remote control to his brain. It was maddening, but he couldn't focus on one thought for more than a few seconds at a time. He always ended up on the same thought, though, how he would finish John if he had the chance. He wondered how guilty he'd feel, and he told himself it didn't matter because it had to be done. Then he would look out the window for his nemesis, and the process would start all over again. The 6 liberated women who'd stayed behind fixed soup and sandwiches for their rescuers. The food took Mark's mind off of his troubles for a while. These women had been raped, beaten, and terrorized for weeks on end, and they still went to the effort to feed the men who'd come to stop the terror. Some of the women the medical team had taken back to the trucks couldn't function at all. Others, like the ones who had volunteered to help with the charade in the courtyard and had cooked without being asked, still could. Mark was amazed at their resilience. He didn't know how they could go through what they had and still seem normal. He figured some of them wanted to do whatever they could to help punish their captors. It may have been the thought of getting revenge that kept them going. If that was the case, they would soon have it, especially if there was a fight. He wondered what they'd do if he really did kill John, or if he didn't. Although he'd taken a psychology course in college, it certainly never addressed this type of situation. In the middle of his second sandwich, Mark spotted a cloud of dust on the horizon. He radioed it into Gunny, and the old man had everyone get ready.